hello again, everybody. Thank you for joining September's Tenant Talk Live. My name is Sydney. For those that might be newer, I go by Sid and I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a manager here at NLIHC. And again, if you're newer, you're joining Tenant Talk Live, which is a monthly meeting that happens the first Monday of every month. That's really aimed at connecting tenants, residents, and renters from across the country to learn about federal housing advocacy, but also how to, lead in their communities and spread this information far and wide. And for today's meeting, we'll be highlighting some of the work that NLIHC is doing on their Southeastern tenant protections cohort. So we'll have a wonderful guest joining us in just a second to talk about that. But if you want to learn a little bit more about it, the cohort itself is composed of members from the Southeastern region of the United States. So this includes states like Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia. Am I missing one? Tennessee? Yeah. So
Tennessee.
just supporting these folks on policies that would promote tenant protections in these states. So yeah, we'll do a little bit more about that in a second, but as always, I do have updates. Kat, I love the background. Sorry not to call you up, but I just saw your screen and I love the background. So we'll get started with a few updates and reminders. The first one always being our community agreements for this space. So let me share my screen so you all can see those. Okay, so for tenant talk agreements, again, just a rule for myself to you all, a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and we're going to be sharing it on our YouTube page afterwards. And then our first rule being the platinum rule, so treating others the way they want to be treated. And the reason why we use the platinum rule versus other rules is because we want to consider how others want to be treated and how that might differ from how we want to be treated. And it rejects the idea that reciprocity should be the norm and instead favors empathy and grace and encourages participants to build connections and understand each other's preferences. And then number 2 is we show respect to others by being considerate of our interactions and accountable for our actions. Number 3 is we listen actively with an open mind and empathy. We listen with the intent to learn something of value from those who are sharing, and we are as attentive to and as present as possible. And then our last community agreement is we take up space and remember to give space to others to ensure everyone feels empowered to contribute to the conversation. This includes muting your microphone when others are speaking. And if for some accident you go off mute for whatever reason, like I'll be here to turn it back on in case you miss it. So don't be startled if that ends up happening and you're like, what just happened? But we'll be in this together. And then I'll share the community agreements too in the chat in case y'all have any feedback and it's your first time here and you want to share some feedback, you can always email that over my way. And then for folks who, I think somebody asked if we were going to record this or have any materials to share afterwards. We do have a recap email that goes out every Friday called The Connection, and that includes recap materials for all of our webinars and meetings and stuff. So if you're not signed up for our emails, I highly encourage you to sign up. And I just dropped that link in the chat as well. And that is all I have for updates and stuff. But before I hand it over to our guests for today, we will be starting off the call by giving everyone a chance to connect with one another and to break the ice and build more of a community-like setting for everyone. And we've been doing this all year this year. In case you're newer, this is something new that folks were really hoping to get from these calls, is just learning more about their community members across the country, but within like this Tenant Talk Live community. So I'm gonna start those breakout rooms in just a second, but today's question, you can talk about anything in these rooms, by the way, but today's prompt is, how are you prioritizing rest and recharging these days? And if you're not, which is real, because sometimes we just can't, but if you're not, how would you like to? You should be getting everybody back now. I know some of y'all, I always catch some of y'all in like the middle of the conversation. So
Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, you're perfectly fine. Cool. Well, does anybody want to share a little bit, one or two people, about what they talked about in their group? You can feel free to raise your hand or just come off mute.
Idea of asking for a disability, like accommodation or for, help with something that's not, expensive, but, helps other folks too who might be, partly disabled and needing a bit of accommodation. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And thank you, Jonathan, for sharing that too. I think making things accessible for it helps everyone, honestly. And that's something that I've heard a lot of advocates say too. Diana Blackwell, I think I saw your hand up too, but
You did, but if I can wait. Let some of the newbies come on if they want to, and I'll come in last.
okay. Y'all heard y'all heard Diana speak. But if there's anyone else who wants to go, feel free to. Okay. Oh, wait. Matt, are you trying to share?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, no problem. I had a little trouble earlier when we went to the breakout rooms, but I'm okay now.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Just wanted to make sure you didn't if you wanted to share anything that you guys talked about in the breakout
Well,
room.
we didn't talk about I guess there was just one other woman. There was a woman in there from Atlanta, and all that we did share was that both Denver and Atlanta are growing cities, and gentrification is an issue in both cities.
Yes. Yes. Gentrification is big evil, impacting a lot of cities, but I'm glad
Yeah,
you were
I
able to connect with someone too.
right. I'm finding it now with our neighborhood. We got some problems here. I even criticize. They're mostly Democrats in Denver, and of course, they criticize Republicans on corporate welfare. Or when it comes to some kind of special deal, they are willing to spend tax money for corporate welfare, and that will impact gentrification greatly in this neighborhood. So I don't know, it then when they see some of the city leaders see a benefit, well then what they want, well then I guess corporate welfare is okay in that situation, and we have a problem here with their tax money being used to change traffic for the benefit of corporate, which will make it less safe. And this is a low to moderate income neighborhood that I'm in.
Thank you for sharing that. We have time for maybe one more, Diana, if you want to go.
Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Diana Blackwell, and I was in the room with Miss Denise Little from Washington, D.C. And we kind of we just briefly talked about what happened during the summer. We talked about, she actually told me a little bit about herself, but she also told me that she is a tenant leader in Washington, D.C., and a mother of, believe she said 3 boys. I hope I have that right. And she does advocacy for housing there. But we also talked about, what she is doing to kind of just cooperate with the environment that she's living in now. She's taking it one day at a time, and just to keep the stress level down, she prays a lot. So it was nice to meet her and hear what her mood is right now with the changing pace in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Thank you.
You sending you lots of love to Venus, because I know it's hard right now and I can empathize with that. We have a few colleagues on the call too, or a few folks on the call that are from DC as well, so we're all hanging in there. And for all of the other folks too that are experiencing things across the country, we're in it together. Oh wow. All right, well, I guess that's the last person that we'll have talk today, but thank you again for participating in those breakout rooms and for sharing. And now I'll introduce our guest for today, and we have Neda Hussein joining us, and she is a research analyst with NLIHC focused on state and local innovation. And in this work, she does a lot of really cool stuff around tenant protections. So if you've ever been on our website and seen like a long list of tenant protections and all of that tracking, you can thank Neda. There was like other people, but Neda has done a lot of work around that as well. But she'll share a little bit more about the Southeastern tenant protections cohort and other tenant protections work that we're also doing. So Neda, I'll hand it over to you to take it away.
Thanks, Sid, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on your call today. I'm really excited to talk about our tenant protections work and our work with our Southeastern cohort. I know we have some cohort members on this call today, Reginald, who is joining us from Mississippi, and then Dr. Bambi Hayes-Brown, who's joining us from Georgia, and who is also our NLIHC board chair. So thank you to them for joining. I will not call on you during this presentation, but if you feel compelled to speak, I welcome you to do so. I will share my screen in just a minute. My mind stops working whenever I try to share, so I will try to talk and share at the same time. But I'm also joined by my colleague, Sarah Abdelhadi, who is the manager of our state and local research work on our research team. I have a PowerPoint prepared today, but please feel free at any point to stop me during this presentation, ask any questions, put your questions in the chat. And I would love to tell you about our state and local level work. So like Sid said, my name is Neda Hussein, and I've been with the coalition now for almost 3 years. When I began at the coalition, I started on our Erase project, which was really a pandemic focused project that helped to ensure that the $46 billion in emergency rental assistance funds made it to the people most in need. And it was really through that project that we saw tenant protections, especially at the state and local level, really gain a lot of momentum. So our state and local level work really came out of that. And I'll talk more about it, but in present time, my work focuses on tenant protections and work at the state and local level. So if any of you are working on tenant protections or are interested in learning more about the ways in which you can advocate for tenant protections in your own communities, I will share my contact information at the end, but I would love to chat with you and learn more about your work. And talk about my work as well. But like Sid said, I'll be talking about our work currently in the South. But our work at the state and local level is really a new initiative that the coalition took on. So like I mentioned, our state and local level work really began during the pandemic. With the temporary protections in place during the pandemic that supported renters who are at risk of housing instability. It was through housing advocates at the state and local level who really asked the question, after this money runs out, after emergency rental assistance either expires or runs out, in what ways can we really protect tenants? And we saw a lot of state and local level tenant protections start to pass at a very quick, in a very quick manner. So at the coalition, we started tracking tenant protections that existed alongside emergency rental assistance. So these were things like pauses on evictions as tenants applied for emergency rental assistance, pay to stay protections that allow tenants to pay their past due rent up until an eviction was executed by the courts, and those sorts of protections. We saw things like just cause protections, rent stabilization protections pop up at the state and local level. But our work at the state and local level really focuses on supporting our partners and the work that they are doing in their communities. Historically, the coalition has focused just on federal level advocacy, but given that there is a patchwork of policies that exist at the federal level, we recognize that states and localities have a lot of power to really support tenants and build out that housing stability and ensuring that tenants are protected from eviction and homelessness. So in 2024, our team at the coalition launched our state and local innovation project. And I will just briefly say that the core of the state and local innovation project is really to build a movement to strengthen tenants' rights. And we do this by supporting our partners and advocating for tenant protection policies. And it is our overall goal, not just at the state and local level, but at the federal level as well, that we can prevent evictions and end homelessness across the country. I mentioned that we began tracking tenant protections during the pandemic. And that was true. We started tracking short-term protections that existed alongside ERA. But in May 2023, we decided to expand our database to give tenant advocates and researchers and government officials a sort of not comprehensive, but a screenshot or an insight into what protections existed for renters across the country. So in our state and local tenant protections database, and Sid will share the link to that database in the chat, we really began tracking protections across 5 main categories, and that included just cause eviction protections, which state that a landlord has to provide a tenant with a reason as to why they're being evicted. And then rent stabilization protections, which either limit the speed or amount by which a landlord can increase a tenant's rent. And then source of income protections, which of course state that a landlord cannot discriminate against a tenant for the income source that they use to pay rent. And then right to counsel policies, which ensures that a tenant who is facing eviction will have representation in court. And then the 5th one, which I always forget, and it will come back to me, but I am forgetting what the 5th one is. But we decided to expand our database to track a number of protections, even though we started with those 5. We currently track protections across a number of categories, across all states and across currently more than 220 localities, which includes cities and towns and counties. And since 2021, which is when we began tracking protections, I mentioned that a lot of momentum was built for long-term protections, especially as we came out of the pandemic and states were looking into ways to protect tenants over the long term. So since 2021, when we started the database, more than 400 tenant protections have been passed. Our database also tracks preemption policies, which for those of you who might not know what preemptions are, they take the power away from localities and make it a power granted solely to the state. So sometimes preemptions are bad because they take away tenant protections that exist. So that's always something that we see come up, and we've seen it a lot in the South, especially with our work with our cohort. So it's important to know that when you look at our database, you'll see all types of protections in there. And I believe as of today, which I checked earlier, we have over 750 protections listed in our database across all years. And I'll add that if you happen to use our database and you notice that there might not be a protection listed that you know exists, please reach out to me and we'll make sure to get it entered. Make sure to get it entered in there. So in addition to the tenant protections that we track on our website, there are a number of resources that we have out. We have a memo article that is forthcoming on how tenant protections were introduced in legislative sessions this year. So we have an internal tracker that just showcases protections that were introduced at the state level this year. And I can pull the link for that and then drop it in the chat after this is done. But we have a number of resources available on our website as well that talk about tenant protection policies. So a lot of written resources like policy briefs, reports and toolkits and case studies, which you can find that highlight tenant protections passed at the state and local level. Most recently, our team at the coalition put out 4 toolkits that cover laws that limit junk fees in the private rental market, rent stabilization protections, just cause eviction standards, and then laws that strengthen code enforcement procedures and habitability standards. And then this year we launched a webinar series to highlight those 4 protections, and they were recorded. Even though the webinar series is over, I can pull the links to those webinars and Sid can send them out in connection or through email, whichever way the information from these calls reaches you all. But the purpose of the webinars was really to highlight advocacy campaigns across the country where tenant advocates led successful advocacy campaigns to pass tenant protections in the 4 categories that I mentioned. So we can share those toolkits and the recordings of the webinars if you're interested. But of course, if you'd like to talk about those protections, I would be happy to set up a call with you to talk more about them. But the purpose of this presentation was really to talk about our work in the Southeast. So in December 2024, the National Low Income Housing Coalition launched our Southeastern Tenant Protections Cohort. The purpose of the cohort was threefold. So we wanted to ensure that we would be able to support states and localities in their work to, 1, strengthen tenant protection policies, 2, to center racial equity in their work, and then 3, to uplift tenant engagement and ensure that tenants and tenant leaders are at the center of this work to advance tenant protections. So we selected teams from 5 states in the South. As Sid mentioned, this includes Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And the teams are comprised of housing organizations, tenant groups, and then legal aid service providers. And they have been working together over the course of this year. The cohort year ends in December 2025. But we have been meeting monthly and they've been working in their communities and in their jurisdictions to really figure out the ways in which they can advance tenant protections and continue the work that they have already been doing, the great work that they've been doing in their communities to pass and advocate for tenant protections. So the purpose of this grant opportunity, and this is really long, but I did this on purpose because we have not written about our Southeastern cohort anywhere. And I know that this PowerPoint will be sent out to you all. So I wanted to make sure that in providing this information, you had everything you needed to know about what we are doing in the South. And that way you can come back and reference it later. But really our work in the South is through a grant opportunity for the 5 state teams that I mentioned, is to provide capacity as well as support to help these teams continue to do the work that they've already been doing to advance tenant protections. So I have included a breakdown of all of the projects that our state teams are working on. And just as a note, these projects include a lot of detail, so I will not read them word for word, but I will just briefly talk about what our teams have been doing, and then I know we have a Q&A, so if our Mississippi or Georgia folks want to talk about some of their work, I invite them to do so. But as I mentioned, our states are working together in teams. So we have one organization who leads each team, and then supporting organizations who help to do this work as well. In Alabama, our partners are working together to create a cohort of tenant leaders. They realized that in Alabama there were no tenant unions that existed, and their goal was really to find out how they can bring tenants together to, one, educate them on the rights that are available to them, but two, to identify what gaps exist in tenant protection policies, so they can come back at a later year or time or legislative session, and advocate together for policies that should be in place in Alabama. In Florida, our team, which is led by the Community Justice Project, are working to fight back against a preemption policy that was passed in 2023 that got rid of more than 36 tenant protections that were already in place related to Tenants' Bill of Rights, laws that expanded notice periods. So one thing that our partners are doing there, and they are based in Miami, Florida, is one, to see what policies can still be enacted and advocated for in the face of the preemption policy that was passed in 2023. One tenant protection that they are working on together is to advance right to counsel policies. And this is not at the state level, this would be at the local level in Miami. And then in Georgia, Georgia recently passed House Bill 404, which guarantees a minimum warranty of habitability for renters in the state. So one thing that our Georgia partners have been doing there is educating tenants, and just leading workshops and bringing tenants together to advocate for their rights, but also to educate them on the rights that exist for them there. And then in Mississippi, our partners there are working on two simultaneous, I don't want to say projects, but two ways to strengthen tenants' rights. The first is, one, educating tenants on their rights as well. One thing that was really crazy to me in Mississippi is that justice of the peace courts are or can be led by judges who don't have any formal legal training. And one thing that our partners there have been trying to do is to work with these justice courts to sort of educate them on the ways in which they can be on the side of renters. But as well, our partners there are also working on connecting with tenant leaders and tenants in rural areas of Mississippi. So that is a project that they are working on. And then finally, in Tennessee, our partner there, their big goal for this year was really to prepare themselves for their housing day on the Hill at the local level. So they really wanted to educate tenant organizers to really push a policy platform at the state legislature to advocate for tenant protections. And like I said, we will send out this PowerPoint so that you can read more in depth onto what projects our partners are leading. But this was my last slide. I know we're coming up on time, so I will say if you have any questions, I'll also post my email in the chat as well, but I'm happy to take questions, Sid, if now is the time for questions. But I will stop sharing my screen so that I can see you all. And if there is anything that you need clarification on, please let me know, but I'd be happy to take questions.
Take a few if anybody wants to ask any. You can feel free to drop them in the chat, but also feel free to raise your hand so that we can, start a line. You guys are so shy today.
I see a comment in the chat, Emily. You noted that where you live in HUD housing, the management company can evict without any reason. One thing I'll note is that while our work focuses primarily on the state and local side, is that because there is a lack of tenant protections at the federal level, and just cause is one of those protections that just does not exist for renters at the federal level, that unfortunately we see a lot of stories like that where tenants can be evicted with no reason given at all, and through no fault of their own. But Kat, I saw you briefly raise your hand, maybe?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah?
I'm in New York City, where we have very strong tenant protections,
Mm-hmm.
theoretically. But I'm, my question is, what happens if a building is regulated under an LIHTC, which is expiring? The building I'm in is converting to a combination of co-op and condominium. And by doing that, they're able to deprive me of every single tenant protection that seems to be airtight. As I've been studying this, the finer points of these laws for the past year, trying to figure out how they're able to do this. But while they can't evict, they can do non-renewal.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a co-op. So they've carved out the regulated apartments, converted them to co-op, and the rest of the market rate apartments are condominium. So under condominium law, I could renew, under co-op, not. They have also, by converting those apartments to co-op, we don't have right of first refusal.
Mm-hmm.
And they can increase my rent by over 500% once it deregulates. So I have zero protections. The only thing is I can't be evicted, obviously, and without just cause, but non-renewal is basically the same.
Yeah, and I will say, Kat, I'm sorry that you are going through that currently.
I think there are 30 buildings that are expiring in New York City right now, and they had local protections that expired, many of them in my case before 2019, when they extended those local rent regulation laws for the lifetime of the tenant. So I'm only under this federal program, which when it expires, and none of the state or local laws will protect me.
Yeah, that's an incredibly unfortunate situation. And again, I'm sorry that you're going through that. I agree that it is it's terrible that it's the way in which tenant protections are enforced oftentimes leave out those who are most who are closest to the issue, and one who would suffer incredible consequences as a result. One thing that we advocate for at the coalition is that when we think about exemptions for tenant protection policies, we always ask, tenants who we work with either on recommendations or just learning more about tenant protection policies, is what exemptions should exist and what properties should be covered. And I think it's always interesting the ways in which landlords or property management companies are able to get around tenant protections. And unfortunately, we see that too many times is often tenant protections are not as strong as they could be, especially in thinking about the ways in which they could protect tenants and they should protect tenants. But thank you for sharing. And if there is anything that we could look into related to laws that exist for your property, I'd be happy to. But I will say I have not had a lot of experience with LIHTC properties. So if it is not me, I'd be happy to find someone at the coalition might be able to look into your situation.
Somebody who is focusing on the
Yeah.
LIHTC expirations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Sid posted a link in the chat to our National Housing Preservation Database.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Netta. There's like and correct me if I'm wrong too, anybody who's on the call who works more closely with this, but I believe that if you're an advocate, you can join for free, and if you need like a what do you call it, like a tutorial on how to use the database too, we'll be able to help you out with that as well. But yeah, we do have like tech experts too that work with the coalition that we'd be happy to help you connect with Kat if you're interested in that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Right now, from what I'm reading online, the academic studies, nobody really has a solution, including academics who are focusing on these expiring LIHTCs. So I don't know if there's really anything anyone can do.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing because they've managed to literally take away all of my tenant protections, every single one, systematically by the way that they planned this conversion.
Wow.
Fair. And I'm sorry you have to go through that too.
Yeah.
I think we're coming close to time, but I can do really brief updates if there's someone else that wants to ask a question. I think I saw Diana Blackwell unmute earlier, but if there's anyone else too that wants to go.
And I'm posting my email again in the chat if anyone would like to reach out. Happy to talk more about our work in the South or our work around tenant protections more broadly. Please feel free to reach out, and of the resources that I mentioned today, if I can pull anything that we've written for you and send it your way, please let me know what you're looking for, and I'd be happy to look into it and see if we have it or maybe one of our partners has written something on it before. But I know Sid mentioned that she has some updates, so I will stop here. Thank you all so much for letting me talk about our work at the coalition. I'm very passionate about our tenant protections work, and it's stories like yours, Kat, that really, really drive the belief that everyone deserves a right to safe, stable, and affordable and accessible housing. And it's because of tenants that these protections are possible. So thank you everyone for letting me speak on your call. And if we can stay connected, please let me know and I will pass it back to you, Sid. And I see Reginald, you just raised your hand.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to say briefly, keep it real short. I'm Reginald Virgil. I work with the National Association of Social Workers, Mississippi and Alabama's chapter, and I work as a public policy education coordinator. And so we have the privilege to work with the Southeastern Tenant Protections Cohort under National Low Income Housing Coalition, and we are part of the project, and we've provided an initiative project within the Delta areas of Mississippi. There are roughly 18 counties in the Delta area. And so with the project that we have, it's called HOME. And the acronym for HOME is Housing Opportunities Made for Everyone. And as Nadia was saying earlier, we take extreme pride in what we do and working with the community and being able to engage them. And so our part of it deals with empowerment, right? Advocacy, right? With tenants. And what we, when we go into the communities, what we're able to speak with tenants about regarding their issues with being renters, right? And everything that was listed prior in the beginning of all the issues or some of those similar issues we're dealing with on an extreme local level. So I wanted to say that the work that we're doing cannot go unnoticed. And a lot of us that are on this call, and I see some folks from the same areas, we're engaged with the people in the community on so many ways to where, the issues are extremely prevalent to a level that goes unnoticed, and even some information that's undocumented that's not always captured, right? And so that's what we do, is that we're capturing that undocumented information in all communities, BIPOC, immigrant community, disabled, African American community, you name it. And so being able to service our areas in the Delta of Mississippi, it was known as housing deserts, is what we call them, and to determine what is needed from the individuals who live there in the areas. And we found out some really good, we've collected information and data, and she will soon share in a report later on this year. So I just want to say thank you so much for providing us with this opportunity to collaborate with you all on this project. And nevertheless, we want to connect with you all so that way we can work as a whole and work together stronger. So that's all I have more to say, but I'll stop right there. So thank you.
Thank you, Reginald. And again, folks, will share information and the PowerPoint and everything later. And if you want to be connected to someone specifically, just let us know and we'll help you with that too. But with that, I'll wrap us up. Just know that our next call is on October 6th at 6 p.m. as always, and we'll be here for another Tenant Talk Live, and I'll drop that registration link in the chat. But if you wish to stay connected with folks outside of these calls, you can join our Facebook and meet some of our other Tenant Talk Live community members there. Hold on a second, let me make sure I got it for you guys. But yeah, that's it. I'll send out all the recap materials and the connection article, and I look forward to seeing y'all later.